He thought he had control over everything, his career, his secrets, his double life. But all it took was one ordinary afternoon for everything to spin out of control. The moment he saw that gurney roll by, his world turned upside down. And there, caught between two lives he never knew existed, his greatest downfall began. If this story caught your interest, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and let me know what city you're watching from. And now, back to our story. New York never sleeps. The streets of Manhattan are buzzing even as the sun begins to dip, behind the mirrored skyscrapers that slice through the gray sky. It's a city that doesn't forgive weakness, that waits for no one, that consumes the weak and glorifies the powerful. And Richard Thompson had always considered himself one of the powerful. At 42, he ran one of the biggest investment firms on Wall Street. His name was synonymous with success, his presence at social events guaranteed headlines, and his confident smile hid secrets that even he couldn't justify. That March afternoon, the sky was too clear for such a chaotic city. Richard adjusted the Swiss watch on his wrist as he waited in the parking garage of a private hospital on the Upper East Side. It wasn't just any hospital. It was the kind of place where senators, CEOs, and celebrities went to be treated for anything from a common cold to more delicate matters, far from the prying eyes of the press. He wasn't alone. Beside him, in the passenger seat of his imported sedan, was Veronica Diaz, a 33-year-old interior designer with impeccably straight brown hair, a perfect manicure, and an expensive perfume that filled the entire car. Veronica was staring at her phone with an expression that mixed anxiety with something Richard couldn't quite decipher. Was it fear? Expectation? He wasn't sure, but he knew this moment would change everything. Or at least, that's what she had said. Pregnant. The word echoed in his mind like a funeral bell. Veronica was pregnant, or so she claimed, and today at that hospital they would confirm it. Richard took a deep breath. This wasn't how he had planned his life. He had a wife at home, Marina, a sweet, dedicated woman who took care of their home, who smiled even when he barely looked her in the eye, who prepared dinners he rarely ate because there was always a last-minute meeting, an unavoidable commitment, a business dinner. Marina. He barely thought about her lately. When was the last time they had a real conversation? When was the last time he asked how she was, what she was feeling, what she dreamed of? He couldn't remember. And now, here he was, about to walk into that hospital with another woman, a woman who claimed to be carrying his child, a child that would change everything, that would force him to make decisions he had been putting off for months. You, okay? Veronica asked, touching his arm with a studied gentleness. I'm fine, he replied, not taking his eyes off the rearview mirror. Let's just get this over with. She smiled, but there was something strange about that smile, something he couldn't name. They got out of the car and walked side by side through the parking garage to the main entrance. The hospital was everything you'd expect from a place of its caliber, clean, quiet, with a scent of lavender that tried to mask the smell of disinfectant. The receptionist smiled politely. One of them recognized Richard and hid her surprise. He was used to it. There was always someone who recognized him, someone who whispered his name, someone who took a discreet photo. They went up to the third floor, where the obstetrics department was located. Veronica clutched her purse tightly, her knuckles white with tension. Richard walked beside her, but his mind was elsewhere. He was thinking about the firm, about the deals he needed to close, about the meeting with international investors scheduled for next week. He couldn't focus on what was about to happen. It was as if a part of him refused to accept this reality. When they reached the department's reception desk, a friendly nurse asked them to wait. They sat in comfortable armchairs, side by side but miles apart. Veronica flipped through a magazine without really seeing the pages. Richard stared at his phone, answering emails, pretending this was just another appointment in his packed schedule. That's when he heard it. The sound of wheels moving quickly down the hall, raised voices, the unmistakable sound of an emergency. He looked up and saw it, a gurney being rushed by paramedics, nurses running alongside, a doctor shouting orders. And on that gurney, her face, pale, her lips parted, her eyes closed, was Marina. The world stopped. Richard's heart pounded so hard he thought everyone could hear it. He shot to his feet, dropping his phone on the floor without even noticing, and took 2 steps toward the hallway. It was her. It was Marina, his wife. But what was she doing here? Why was she being rushed in? What had happened? One of the nurses yelled to the doctor, "She's losing a lot of blood. She's in shock. We need to stabilize her now." The doctor, a man of about 50 with graying hair and an impeccable white coat, glanced around and his eyes met Richard's. There was a flicker of recognition. The doctor knew who he was, and then, with an expression that mixed urgency with what looked like disapproval, he turned and followed the team, disappearing through a set of double doors marked obstetric emergency. Richard stood there, frozen in the middle of the hallway, unable to process what he had just seen. Marina was pregnant. How? When? Why didn't he know? The questions bombarded his mind without order, without logic. He felt as if the floor was opening up beneath him, as if all the walls around him were crumbling. Veronica came up to him, touching his arm. "Richard, what's wrong? Who was that woman?" He turned to her, his face ashen. "That's my wife," he said, his voice a hoarse whisper. "What?" Veronica took a step back, her eyes wide. "Your wife, what is she doing here?" "I don't know." Richard ran a hand through his hair, desperate. "I don't know. I didn't know that she was—" He couldn't finish the sentence. The words wouldn't come out. Veronica was silent for a moment, processing. Then, slowly, her face changed. The look of surprise gave way to something different. Anger, jealousy, and maybe fear. "You didn't know your wife was here," she repeated, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "How convenient, Richard." "Now is not the time," he snapped. "I need to know what's happening to her." He turned and walked to the reception desk. The nurse looked at him with a mix of compassion and embarrassment. "Sir, do you know the patient who was just brought in?" "I'm her husband," Richard said quickly, his voice trembling. "Marina Thompson. I need to know what happened." The nurse hesitated, then typed something into her computer. "Mr. Thompson, your wife was admitted a few minutes ago with severe acute distress, extremely high blood pressure, and signs of severe preeclampsia. She's pregnant with twins, about 28 weeks along." Twins. The word thundered in Richard's mind. He gripped the edge of the counter to keep from falling. 28 weeks, almost 7 months. How had he not noticed? How had he been so blind, so absent, so completely oblivious to the life of the woman he shared a home with? Veronica was behind him, listening to everything. He could feel her presence, the tension radiating off. Her like heat waves. "So your wife is pregnant with twins," she said, her voice low but sharp. "And you didn't know?" Richard didn't answer. He couldn't. All he could think about was Marina, that pale face on the gurney, the closed eyes, the fragility of the body he had barely touched in months. A doctor came out of the emergency room, pulling off his surgical gloves. It was the same man from before, the one with graying hair. He looked at Richard, his expression hardening. "Mr. Thompson, I need to speak with you in private." Richard nodded and followed the doctor into a small consultation room. Before closing the door, he turned to Veronica and said, "Wait here." She crossed her arms, clearly annoyed, but said nothing. Inside the room, the doctor crossed his arms and stared at Richard. "I'm Dr. Henry Miller, the obstetrician in charge of your wife's case. I've known her for a few years. She's been my patient before. Mr. Thompson, your wife is fighting for her life and the lives of your children. She arrived here in critical condition. Sky-high blood pressure, clear signs of prolonged emotional neglect, extreme stress. Tell me, did you know she was pregnant?" Richard looked down. "No," he admitted, his voice weak. "I didn't know." "You didn't know," Dr. Miller repeated, his tone heavy with reproach. "Your wife is 7 months pregnant, Mr. Thompson. 7 months. And you didn't notice. You didn't talk to her. You didn't ask if she was okay." He paused, taking a deep breath. "She's been alone for a long time, hasn't she? Carrying 2 lives inside her, all alone, while you, let me guess, were too busy with your business." Richard felt guilt pierce his chest like a blade. He started, but he didn't know what to say. There was no defense, no justification. She might not make it, Dr. Miller said bluntly. The babies are at risk too. We're going to do everything we can, but you need to understand the gravity of the situation. And furthermore, what exactly were you here for today? I saw the woman you were with out there. It didn't look like a casual visit. Richard remained silent. Dr. Miller shook his head in disappointment. You don't have to answer. I get it. Look, Mr. Thompson, I'm not here to judge anyone, but as a doctor, as someone who has seen too many preventable tragedies, I have to say this. If your wife survives, if your children survive, you have a choice to make. Because up until now, from what I can see, you've chosen everything but them. The doctor left the room, leaving Richard alone. He sank into a chair, his face in his hands. Everything was falling apart. The perfect life he had built, the image of success he had so carefully cultivated, it was all a lie. And now, his wife was in there, between life and death, carrying his children he didn't even know existed. When he returned to the hallway, Veronica was waiting for him. She looked at him, expecting an explanation. Well? She asked. Richard stared at her. I need to stay here, he said. My wife, she's... He hesitated. She's in critical condition. Veronica crossed her arms. And what about us? What about our baby? Our baby, Richard repeated, and something in his tone made Veronica flinch. Veronica, we need to do the tests. Let's confirm everything. She hesitated but agreed. They went to the office where they had an appointment. The doctor who saw them was efficient, ordered the necessary tests and asked routine questions. Veronica answered everything confidently, showed previous ultrasounds she had brought, and talked about her symptoms. Richard heard it all as if he were underwater, the voices muffled and distant. An hour later, the doctor returned with the results, and that's when everything shattered completely. Ms. Diaz, the doctor began, her tone careful. The tests show that you are not pregnant. You never were. Silence. A silence so thick it seemed to suck all the air out of the room. What? Richard was the first to speak, turning to Veronica. She was pale, her eyes wide. But the ultrasounds, she started to stammer. The doctor picked up the images Veronica had brought, examining them closely. These images aren't real, she said, gently but firmly. They've been manipulated. They're fake. Richard shot to his feet. You lied, he said, his voice dangerously low. You lied this whole time. Veronica stood up too, tears starting to stream down her face. Richard, I can explain. Explain what? He yelled, making the doctor recoil. You faked a pregnancy? Why? To manipulate me, to force me to leave my wife? Veronica cried harder, but Richard felt no pity. He felt anger, betrayal, disgust. How had he been so blind? How had he believed everything without question, without demanding real proof? Get out of here, he said, pointing to the door. Get out now before I call security. I never want to see your face again. Ever. Veronica hesitated, opened her mouth to speak, but he cut her off. Go, Veronica. It's over. She ran out, sobbing. Richard stood there, shaking with rage and shame. The doctor gently touched his arm. Sir, maybe you should sit down for a minute. He shook his head. I need to see my wife, he said. I need to be with her. He went back to the obstetric emergency unit, but they still wouldn't let him in. He paced the hallway, unable to stand still. Hours passed. The sun set outside, the city lit up, and Richard remained there, waiting, praying, begging for a chance he might not deserve. Are you enjoying this story? Tell me what you think of it, and how you think it will end. The night fell heavy over New York, but inside the hospital, time seemed suspended in its own dimension, where minutes dragged on like hours, and every second carried the weight of an eternity. Richard remained seated in an uncomfortable chair in the hallway, his elbows on his knees, his hands clasped, his eyes fixed on the polished hospital floor. People passed by, doctors, nurses, families of other patients, but he saw no one. He was lost in a labyrinth of thoughts that were tearing him apart from the inside. How had he gotten here? How had he become the man he was now, so far from the person he once was? He remembered when he met Marina 8 years ago at a friend's graduation party. She was wearing a simple blue dress that highlighted her brown eyes and shy smile. She wasn't the most beautiful woman at the party, not the most extravagant, but there was something about her that drew him in immediately. A light, a genuine sweetness that seemed rare in a world so full of masks. They talked all night. She was a literature professor, passionate about poetry, loved Emily Dickinson and Virginia Woolf. She spoke with sparkling eyes about her students, about how she believed in the transformative power of education. Richard had been enchanted. She was so different from the women he usually met in business circles. Ambitious, calculating women interested only in status and money. Marina was real. She was genuine. And for a while, he was genuine with her too. They dated for 2 years before getting married in a simple ceremony with just family and close friends. Their honeymoon was in Hawaii. 10 days of peace, blue ocean, sincere laughter, and uncomplicated love. They were the happiest days of Richard's life, though he only realized it now, sitting in that cold, sterile hallway. What happened after that? When did everything change? It was gradual, he knew that. There wasn't a specific moment when he decided to pull away. It was the firm growing, demanding more time, more dedication. It was the constant travel, the dinners with clients, the meetings that stretched late into the night. Marina was understanding at first. She always was. She would smile, say she understood that it was okay, but over time that smile grew weaker, more forced, and Richard, selfish as he was, pretended not to notice. When did he stop asking how her day was? When did he stop having dinner at home? When was the last time they watched a movie together or just talked about life, about dreams, about fears? He couldn't remember. And that was killing him now. The memory of Marina waiting for him every night. The table set, the dinner getting cold, until she gave up and ate alone. The memory of her trying to tell him about a book she'd read, about a special student, about a plan she had, and him barely listening, distracted by his phone, by reports, by numbers that meant nothing in the end. And then came Veronica. He met her at a corporate event. She was there redesigning the space for an important client. She was beautiful, well-dressed, spoke the language of success, understood business. They started talking. She was interesting, or at least he thought she was. She praised him constantly, told him he was incredible, a business genius, a fascinating man. And he, vain and foolish, believed her. He thought he deserved that attention, that admiration. Marina never praised him like that. But did he give her any reason to praise him at home? Did he treat Marina like someone who deserved his best? The affair with Veronica started 3 months ago. Dinners that turned into drinks at a discreet bar, conversations that became intimate, touches that became kisses, and then the lie, the fake pregnancy. How did he not see it? How did he not suspect? He was so immersed in his own arrogance that he didn't question a thing. He accepted everything she said, planned a future with her, while his real wife, the woman he promised to love and protect, suffered in silence. Richard wiped away a tear that had escaped without permission. He hadn't cried in years. He had forgotten what it felt like to have that ache in his chest, that lump in his throat. But now here, facing the possibility of losing Marina and the children he didn't even know he had, all that was left was the pain. The door to the emergency room opened and Dr. Miller came out. Richard stood up immediately. "How is she?" he asked, desperate. The doctor looked at him, his expression tired. "We've managed to stabilize her for now. Her blood pressure is under control, but she's still in critical condition. The babies are holding on, but it's a delicate situation. Any additional stress could trigger serious complications." "Can I see her?" Richard asked. Dr. Miller hesitated. "She's sedated, unconscious, but yes, you can see her. However, Mr. Thompson, I need to be clear. Your wife is fragile. When she wakes up, she will need calm, support, and love. There can be no more stress in her life. Do you understand what I'm saying?" Richard nodded. "I understand." The doctor led him to the room. It was a private room, with light-colored walls and a large window overlooking the illuminated city. And there, on the bed, surrounded by wires, monitors, and machines, was Marina. Her face was even paler under the artificial light, her brown hair spread. Across the pillow, her delicate hands resting on the slightly rounded belly he had never noticed. Richard approached slowly, as if afraid of breaking her with a sudden movement. He pulled up a chair and sat beside the bed. He took her hand carefully, felt the cold skin. "Marina," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "Marina, forgive me. Forgive me for everything, for not seeing, for not asking, for not being here." She didn't answer, of course. She just lay there, breathing softly, her chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm monitored by the machines. Richard stayed there, holding her hand, crying in silence. He promised himself and her that if he got a second chance, he would be different. He would be the man she deserved, the father his children needed. The hours passed. Richard didn't leave her side. He fell asleep in the chair, waking up to the morning light streaming through the window. Marina was still unconscious. A nurse came in to check her vitals, made notes on a clipboard, and left without a word. Richard stood up, stretched his aching body, but he didn't leave. He couldn't. He wouldn't abandon her again. He went to the bathroom in the room, washed his face, and looked at himself in the mirror. He saw a man he barely recognized. Dark circles under his eyes, stubble on his chin, disheveled hair, wrinkled clothes. He didn't look like the powerful, confident businessman everyone knew. He just looked like a scared, regretful, desperate man. When he returned to the room, Dr. Miller was there, examining Marina. "Good morning, Mr. Thompson. Did you get any rest?" "Not much," Richard replied. "How is she?" "Stable. That's a good sign. But I can't predict when she'll wake up yet. Her body is recovering from the trauma. We need to be patient." Richard nodded. "Doctor, I need to know, the babies, are they okay?" Dr. Miller took a portable ultrasound machine, applied gel to Marina's belly, and moved the transducer carefully. The screen showed two small forms, two hearts beating in a synchronous rhythm. "Look," he said, pointing. "A boy and a girl. They're holding on well, considering the circumstances." Richard felt something break inside him. A boy and a girl, his children. Life he had helped create but had abandoned before he even knew it existed. How did Marina manage to carry this weight alone? How did she endure all these months without telling him? And why didn't she tell him? Was she afraid of his reaction? Did she already know, deep down, that he wouldn't be there for her? He spent the day there, by her side. He ignored the calls from the office, the emails flooding his phone, the messages from colleagues asking where he was. None of it mattered. For the first time in years, Richard understood that there were things bigger than business, bigger than money, bigger than success. There was life, there was love, there was a chance to start over. In the late afternoon, the door to the room opened and Dr. Miller entered with a woman. "Mr. Thompson, this is the hospital's psychologist, Dr. Beatrice Collins. She'll be following your wife's case." The woman was young, with black hair tied in a bun, discreet glasses and a kind expression. "Good morning, Mr. Thompson. I'd like to talk a bit about Marina's emotional state." Richard agreed. They left the room and went to a small private office. Dr. Collins opened a file. "Mr. Thompson, your wife was here 2 weeks ago for a prenatal checkup. That's when I found out she had been seeing me for a few months. She sought psychological help because she was suffering. She told me she felt invisible, abandoned, that her marriage was falling apart, but she didn't know how to stop it. She told me she found out about the pregnancy 4 months ago and didn't have the courage to tell you." "Why?" Richard asked, his voice faint. "Why didn't she tell me?" Dr. Collins looked at him. "She said you were always absent, always busy, and she feared the news of the pregnancy would just be another burden for you. She said she'd rather carry it alone than see the contempt in her husband's eyes." Richard felt as if he'd been punched in the gut. Contempt. Marina thought he held her in contempt. And maybe, in a way, she was right. He didn't consciously despise her, but his actions, his indifference, his neglect, weren't those signs of contempt? "Doctor," he said, his voice trembling, I didn't know. I didn't realize how much I was hurting her. I see it now, and I don't know if I can forgive myself." Dr. Collins nodded. "Forgiveness is a process, Mr. Thompson, but the first step is acknowledging the mistake, and you seem to be doing that. Now, when Marina wakes up, she will need support, patience, and true love, not empty promises or performative guilt. She will need to see real change," Richard promised. "I will change. I will be the man she deserves." Dr. Collins smiled, but it was a sad smile. "I hope so. Marina deserves to be happy, and your children deserve a present father." He returned to the room. Night was falling over New York again. Richard sat beside Marina, took her hand. He began to speak softly, telling her everything he felt, everything he thought, everything he wanted to change. He didn't know if she could hear him, but he had to say it. He had to let out all that weight, all that guilt, all that pain. And then, in the middle of the night, when the hospital's silence was almost palpable, Marina moved. Just a slight twitch of her fingers, but Richard felt it. He leaned forward. "Marina, can you hear me?" Her eyes opened slowly, confused, disoriented. They blinked a few times, trying to focus. And when they finally focused on Richard, there was something in them he would never forget. It wasn't relief, it wasn't love, it was fear, and maybe sadness. Marina blinked several times, as if trying to understand where she was, why there were so many wires around her, why her body felt so heavy. Her first reaction was to bring a hand to her belly, an instinctive gesture of protection. "The babies," she whispered, her voice weak and hoarse. "My babies." Richard held her hand gently. "They're okay, Marina. They're okay. Both of them, a boy and a girl." She looked at him then, really looked at him, and there was so much in that gaze. Confusion, pain, hurt. "What are you doing here?" she asked, and the question had layers of meaning that Richard felt pierce his chest. He was there in that specific moment, yes, but where had he been for the past few months? Where was he when she needed him? "I'm here for you," he answered, squeezing her hand softly. "For all of you. Marina, He hesitated, choosing his words. "I didn't know you were pregnant. I didn't know anything. And I'm sorry, I'm so sorry for not noticing, for not being present." She looked away, fixing her eyes on the ceiling. A tear rolled down the corner of her eye. "You never were, Richard. I tried to tell you. I tried so many times, but you never had time. You never listened, so I stopped trying." Richard felt each word like a sharp blade. She was right. She was absolutely right. And he had no defense, no justification, just the raw, naked truth of his neglect. "I'm going to change, Marina. I promise I'll change. I'm here now, and I'm not leaving. I'll be the husband you deserve, the father our children need." Marina closed her eyes, tired. "I don't want promises, Richard. Promises don't mean anything. You've promised so many things over the years. You promised you'd have dinner at home, that you'd take a vacation with me, that you'd be present. But you never were. So your promises." She opened her eyes and looked at him, her gaze pained. "Your promises are just empty words." Before Richard could respond, the door opened and Dr. Miller walked in. "Ah, good. You're awake, Marina. How are you feeling?" She forced a weak smile. "Tired, confused, what happened?" The doctor approached, checking the monitors. "You had a severe episode of preeclampsia. Your blood pressure was dangerously high, your body was in shock. They rushed you here and we managed to stabilize you. But Marina, I have to be honest, you and the babies came very close to a tragedy." Marina brought a hand to her mouth, her eyes filling with tears. "My babies, are they really okay?" "They are," Dr. Miller assured her. "But you need absolute rest. No stress, no worries. Your body needs to recover, and the babies need a calm environment to continue developing. You'll stay here in the hospital under constant observation until at least the 32nd week. After that, we'll evaluate if it's safe for you to go home." "4 weeks," Marina murmured. "I'm going to be here for 4 weeks." "It's the safest option," the doctor confirmed. "I know it's not easy, but it's necessary." She nodded, resigned. Richard touched her arm. "I'll be here with you. Every day." She looked at him but said nothing. Dr. Miller left, leaving them alone again. The silence between them was heavy, laden with years of unsaid words, accumulated grievances, and a love that had worn away under indifference. "Marina," Richard began, "we need to talk. About everything, about us." She sighed. "Not now, Richard. I'm tired. I need to rest." But there was something in her voice, a coldness he had never heard before. Something had changed in her. Maybe it was the near-death experience, maybe it was the realization that he was there, in that hospital, not for her, but because of a cruel twist of fate. In the following days, Richard kept his word. He didn't leave the hospital. He slept in an armchair next to Marina's bed, ate the bad cafeteria food, and completely neglected his work. His partners called, concerned, but he didn't answer. He needed to be there. He needed to show he had changed. But Marina remained distant, polite but distant. She thanked him when he brought her something, smiled when he tried to make a joke, but there was a wall between them. A wall he had built, brick by brick, with his absences. It was on the fourth day that everything changed again. Richard had stepped out briefly for a coffee, and when he returned, he found Dr. Miller talking with Marina. They seemed comfortable with each other, laughing at something the doctor had said. There was a lightness in Marina that Richard hadn't seen in years. When she saw him, she stopped laughing, her face returning to that neutral expression. Richard felt something strange, jealousy, insecurity. He had never been jealous of Marina. He had always been so arrogant, so self-assured, that he never imagined he could lose her. But there, seeing her smile at another man the way she used to smile at him years ago, he understood that he might have already lost her. Dr. Miller noticed Richard's presence. Mr. Thompson, I was just talking to Marina about her treatment. She's recovering well, but we still need to be careful." Richard forced a smile. "That's great." The doctor said his goodbyes and left. Marina went back to looking out the window, avoiding Richard's gaze. "You two seem close," he commented, trying to sound casual. Marina turned to him. "Henry is a wonderful doctor, very attentive. He's known me for years. He treated a friend of mine when she had complications with her pregnancy. It was on her recommendation that I chose him as my obstetrician when I found out I was pregnant." "You chose him," Richard repeated. "When you found out? And when was that?" 4 months ago, she answered directly. "I found out I was pregnant, had my first appointment with him, started my prenatal care. All alone, Richard. All without you." He sat down heavily. "Why didn't you tell me, Marina? Why did you keep this from me?" She gave a bitter laugh. "Because you didn't give me the space to tell you. You'd come home late if you came home at all. You barely looked at me. When I tried to start a conversation, you were on your phone or tired or had to review, or had to... Some documents. How was I supposed to share news like that with someone who didn't even see me anymore?" Richard had no answer, because there was no answer. She was right, completely right. "Marina," he tried again, "I know I messed up. I know I failed you in every possible way, but I'm here now and I want to fix this. I want us to have a chance. For the babies, for us." Marina stared at him, her eyes welling up. "For the babies," she repeated. "You want to fix this for the babies. What if there were no babies? Richard, what if I wasn't pregnant? Would you be here? Would you have come back to me? Or would you have continued with your perfect life, with your important meetings and your—" She stopped, her voice breaking. "And my what?" Richard prompted, though he already knew where she was going. "With your other women," she finished. "You think I didn't know. You think I'm that naive. I knew, Richard. I could smell the different perfume on you, see the messages you hid, the smiles you gave your phone but never gave me. I knew, and I stayed anyway because I loved you, because I believed you would come back to me. But you didn't. You just pulled away further." Richard felt his world collapse. She knew. The whole time she knew. And yet she stayed. She suffered in silence. She carried that pain alone. "Marina," he said, his voice choked. I have no excuses. You're right. About everything. I was selfish, arrogant, cruel. I hurt you in every way possible. And the woman, she—" He took a deep breath. "She wasn't pregnant. She lied, faked the whole thing. I found out the day you were admitted." Marina looked at him, surprised. "She lied?" He nodded. "Yes, she was never pregnant. It was all manipulation. To get me away from you, I guess. Or to have me all to herself. I don't know. But it's over. I ended everything. I only want you now, Marina. I only want my family." She was silent for a long moment. Then she whispered, "But it's not that simple, Richard. You can't just come back and expect everything to be okay. Not after everything. I've changed. I'm not that woman who accepted scraps of attention anymore, who pretended everything was fine when I was falling apart inside. That Marina is dead. And the one who's here now," she touched her belly, "carrying our children, is someone different, someone stronger, someone who knows her worth." Richard felt tears stream down his face. "And you're right to be that way. You're right not to trust me. But Marina, please give me a chance to prove I've changed, a chance to be the man you deserve." She looked away. "I don't know if I can, Richard. I don't know if there's anything left in me for you." Just then the door burst open. An elegant, furious woman stormed in. It was Veronica. Richard shot to his feet. "What are you doing here? Get out now!" Veronica ignored him, looking directly at Marina. "So you're the famous wife, the poor little thing, the victim." Marina stared at her, frightened. "Who are you?" "I'm the woman your husband really loves," Veronica said venomously. "The woman he spent his nights with while you stayed home, pathetic, waiting for him." Marina turned pale. Richard moved forward, grabbing Veronica's arm. "You're leaving now or I'm calling security." Veronica wrenched her arm free. "You owe me this, Richard. You owe me an explanation. You promised me a future, and now you're here playing the repentant husband. What a joke." "I don't owe you anything," Richard said, his voice firm. "You lied, you manipulated, and it's over. Accept it and move on." Veronica let out a hysterical laugh. "Accept it? You destroyed my life. You made promises you didn't keep, and now you discard me like I'm nothing. No, I won't accept it. And if I can't have you, I'll make sure she," pointing at Marina, "can't either." And then, before anyone could stop her, Veronica pulled out her phone. "I've already sent everything to the press. Pictures of us, your messages promising a divorce, documents that prove you were planning to leave her even before you knew about the babies. By tomorrow, everyone will know what kind of man you are, and she'll be exposed as the woman who couldn't keep her husband." Marina let out a pained sound, clutching her chest. The monitors started beeping wildly. Richard ran into the hallway, screaming for help. Nurses and Dr. Miller rushed in. Marina was having another blood pressure spike. The situation was critical again. Veronica was escorted out of the room by security, shouting threats. And there, in the middle of that chaos, Richard understood that he had completely lost control of his life, and maybe of his family. The hours that followed were the most agonizing of Richard's life. Marina was stabilized again, but this time Dr. Miller was categorical. "Mr. Thompson, one more episode like that and we could lose the babies, or your wife, or all of them. What happened in there?" Richard told him about Veronica, the threats, the media exposure. The doctor shook his head, clearly disappointed. "I'm going to get a restraining order against this woman. She cannot come near this hospital or Marina again. As for the press," he paused, "we need to do damage control. The hospital has a PR team. I'll get them on it." But it was too late. The next morning, the headlines were everywhere. Gossip sites, news portals, social media. Billionaire cheats on wife pregnant with twins. Designer reveals affair with married man. Photos of Richard and Veronica at restaurants, embracing, smiling. Messages edited out of context, making him look like a cold monster who planned to abandon his sick wife. The narrative Veronica had built was destructive. It painted Marina as a victim, but also as the woman who couldn't hold on to her husband, and Richard as the complete villain. The firm where Richard worked acted swiftly. They called early. The chairman of the board's voice was harsh. "Richard, you're on leave, effective immediately." Until this scandal is resolved, you no longer represent this company." Richard tried to argue, but it was useless. They hung up on him. In a matter of hours, his reputation was destroyed. Years of building a career, a public image, all down the drain. But strangely, Richard didn't care as much as he thought he would. His only concern was Marina and the babies. He returned to her room. Marina was awake, looking out the window. A nurse had brought in the papers, even against medical advice. She had seen everything. Richard entered slowly, expecting an explosion of rage, the deserved accusations. But Marina just looked at him, her eyes red from crying. "Were they true?" she asked, her voice weak. "The messages about the divorce? Were you going to leave me?" Richard sat down, unable to meet her gaze. "Yes," he admitted. "There was a moment when I considered it. When I was blind, lost, thinking that empty life I was leading was what I wanted. But Marina, I never took any real steps. I never contacted a lawyer, never started anything concrete, because deep down, I always knew it was you. It was always you." Marina gave a sad laugh. "But it wasn't enough, was it? Knowing it was me. You still cheated on me. You still abandoned me. You still made me feel like I was worthless." He didn't answer. There was nothing to say. She was right, completely right. She closed her eyes, tired. "I want you to leave, Richard. I need space, I need to think." "But Marina, the babies," he began. "The babies are well taken care of here," she interrupted. "Henry is handling everything. And I need to take care of myself now. Alone. Like I always have." Richard felt his heart break, but he nodded. "Okay, I'll respect your space. But Marina, know that I love you. I always have. I was just too stupid to show it." She didn't respond. She just turned her face to the window, and Richard left, feeling like he had lost everything that truly mattered. In the following days, the scandal only grew. Veronica gave interviews, crying, playing the victim. She claimed Richard had promised to leave his wife, that he loved her, that they had plans for a life together. All lies, but the public loved the drama. Richard tried to defend himself, but his every word was twisted, every explanation turned into more fuel for the fire. His life was in ruins, but something happened that he didn't expect. Dr. Miller, who had been watching everything with growing indignation, decided to act. He called a press conference, an unusual move for a doctor, but he had his reasons. In front of cameras and journalists, he revealed the truth. "Marina Thompson has been my patient for months. She sought medical and psychological support because she was suffering in silence. She was pregnant with twins, alone, emotionally abandoned. And as for the other woman involved," he paused, "medical tests prove she was never pregnant. She forged documents, manipulated ultrasounds, and created a hoax to achieve her personal goals. That is a crime, and I will ensure it is investigated." The bombshell dropped. Now the narrative shifted. Veronica went from victim to villain. Lawsuits started to appear. Defamation, identity fraud, forgery. She tried to defend herself, but the evidence was irrefutable. The fake ultrasounds were analyzed, the manipulations exposed. Within days, she was indicted. And public opinion, always fickle, began to turn. Richard was still seen as a cheater, but now also as a victim of manipulation. And Marina finally was seen for what she always was, a strong woman who survived abandonment and betrayal. Richard watched it all from a distance. He didn't go back to the hospital. He respected Marina's request, but every day he called Dr. Miller asking how she was, and the doctor kindly would update him. "She's doing well. The babies are growing, she's getting stronger." But Richard sensed something in the doctor's words, a closeness, an affection that went beyond professional. And he understood. Henry loved Marina. Maybe he always had. And he was there, present, caring for her in a way Richard never knew how. Weeks passed. Marina reached 32 weeks of gestation. The babies were healthy, strong. Dr. Miller suggested she stay until the 37th week to ensure total safety. She agreed, and during all that time Richard stayed away. He sent flowers, which were accepted by the staff, but never mentioned. He sent letters which he didn't know if she read. He lived in a limbo of regret and desperate hope. It was on a June afternoon, as winter began to show its face in New York, that Richard got the call. It was Dr. Miller. "Mr. Thompson, Marina has gone into labor. It's happening now. I thought you should know." Richard didn't think. He raced to the hospital, his heart pounding like never before. When he arrived, he went straight to the maternity ward. A nurse tried to stop him, but Dr. Miller appeared. "Let him in, he's the father." Richard entered the delivery room, and there was Marina, sweating, breathing heavily, holding a nurse's hand. When she saw him, she froze, her eyes wide. "What are you doing here?" she asked between contractions. I had to be here," Richard answered. "For our children, for you." Marina was about to reply, but another contraction hit. Dr. Miller took charge. "Marina, you're doing great. A few more pushes and you'll meet your babies." Richard stood there, helpless, watching the woman he loved fight for the life they had created together. And finally, after what felt like an eternity, a cry echoed through the room. The first baby, a girl, small but with strong lungs. Minutes later, the second, a boy, just as perfect. Dr. Miller cleaned them, checked them, and with a smile announced, "They're perfect, completely healthy." Marina cried with relief, exhaustion, and love. Richard cried too, seeing those two tiny lives that were a part of him, a part of Marina, a part of something bigger than any mistake he had ever made. Dr. Miller brought the babies to Marina, who held them with a reverent gentleness. "My children," she whispered, "my children." Richard approached slowly. "Can I?" he asked, hesitant. Marina looked at him, then at the babies, then back at him, and she nodded. Richard took the baby boy, felt the light weight, the warmth, the life, pulsing. It was the most incredible thing he had ever felt. He looked at Marina, and in that moment, everything that mattered was right there. Those babies, that woman, that chance to start over. But Marina spoke, her voice tired but firm. "Richard, they are your children. They always will be. And you will always be welcome in their lives. But me," she paused, "I still don't know if I can forgive you. I don't know if I can trust you again." Richard nodded, tears falling freely. "I understand, and I'll wait, for as long as it takes. I'll prove I've changed. Not with words, but with actions." She smiled, but it was a sad smile. "We'll see." In the following days, Richard was present. He visited every day, helped with the babies, brought whatever Marina needed. But he kept an emotional distance, respecting her boundaries, and he watched. He watched how Dr. Miller also visited, always attentive, always kind. He watched how Marina smiled at him in a way she didn't smile at anyone else, and he understood that he might have lost his chance. A week later, Marina was discharged. Richard offered to take her home, but she gently refused. "Henry is going to take me, and he's going to help me with the babies for the first few days." Richard felt the jealousy, the pain, but also a deep understanding. She deserved someone who would always put her first. And maybe that someone wasn't him. On the morning Marina left the hospital, Richard was there. He helped put the babies in their car seats, made sure everything was right. And before she got into Henry's car, he held her hand. "Marina, I know I messed up. I know it might be too late. But I want you to know, I will be the best father I can be for our children. And if you ever decide to give me a second chance," she whispered, "but now I'm going to live. I'm going to be happy for my children, for me." Richard nodded, let go of her hand, and he watched the car drive away, taking his family, his heart, his chance at redemption. But for the first time he accepted it. He accepted the consequences of his actions. He accepted that not everything can be fixed, and he accepted that Marina deserved to be happy, even if it wasn't with him. Months passed. Richard was a present father. He visited the babies regularly, participated in their routine, helped financially and emotionally, and slowly he rebuilt a relationship with Marina, not as husband and wife, but as co-parents, as friends, as two people who once loved each other and were now learning to respect one another. And yes, Marina and Henry grew closer. He was always there, caring, loving, being what Richard never was. And though it hurt, Richard was happy for her, because Marina was happy, truly happy. And one afternoon, almost a year after the twins were born, Marina reached out to Richard. They met at a coffee shop. She was different, radiant, alive. "I want you to know," she began, "that I've forgiven you. I haven't forgotten, I never will. But I've forgiven you. Because carrying that weight doesn't do me any good. And our children deserve parents who aren't at war." Richard felt something release in his chest. "Thank you, Marina, thank you. For everything. For being who you are, for surviving. For giving me these wonderful children." She smiled. "And you, Richard? Have you found your way?" He thought about it. He lost his company, but found other ways to work. He lost his wife, but gained a true friendship. He lost his old life, but built a new one, a better one. "So yes," he said, "I have." Marina touched his hand. "I'm happy for you. Truly." They talked more, about the babies, about life, about new beginnings. And when they said goodbye, Richard felt peace. True peace. Life went on. Richard became the father he promised to be. Marina found true love with Henry, who adopted the twins as his own. And together, in different ways, they built a family. Not a traditional family, not a perfect family, but a real family, based on respect, love, and second chances. And Richard finally understood that sometimes losing everything is necessary to find what truly matters. And what truly matters isn't having power, money, or status. It's having love. It's being present. It's being the person your children look up to, not for what you have, but for who you are. And there, watching his children grow up healthy, happy, and loved, Richard found his redemption. Not in the way he imagined, not with the ending he planned, but with the acceptance that life isn't about us. It's about those we love, and about doing the right thing, even when it costs you everything. End of story. Hey everyone, we hope the story of Richard and Marina touched your heart. If you were moved, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments what part stood out to you the most. Every day we bring you intense stories like this one, revealing the deepest side of the human soul. We'll see you in the next episode.